Hi everyone, welcome to Ask a Property Manager episode number 63. Today is March 24th, 2021. We're coming to you from Studio 2.0 here at Own Buffalo. I'm Andrew Schultz, principal broker of Own Buffalo Inc. And on today's show, we're going to be talking about the possible extension of the National Eviction Moratorium. Can you reject an application based on bad personality? How to handle security deposits when selling your rental property? We'll look at some questions from housing providers around the country and so much more. But before we jump into all that, we're going to go ahead and plug our social media. New episodes of Ask a Property Manager drop every Wednesday, 10 a.m. Eastern, live on Facebook. You can catch the replay the same day on both Facebook and YouTube. Don't forget about our Instagram account as well. We share some stuff over there that we don't share in other places. And last but not least, don't forget about the Rent Prep for Landlords podcast. New episode of the podcast drops tomorrow. That's Thursday. We're going to be taking a look at drunk tenants crawling through doggy doors, renters violating the rules when it comes to subleasing their apartments, and a tenant's employer requesting a W-9 from the landlord. Don't miss out on that one. New episodes of the Rent Prep for Landlords podcast drop every other Thursday morning, anywhere podcasts are heard, or over at rentprep.com/podcast. We're going to go ahead and jump right into our news of the day here. We have two stories. One's a little bit more serious, one's a little bit more lighthearted. We're going to start with the more serious one here. This comes to us via CNBC. The National Eviction Ban is set to expire at the end of March. The CDC likely will extend it. We're going to jump right into the article here. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention may be moving to extend the National Eviction Moratorium that has been in effect since September, and it is now scheduled to expire at the end of March. That's just a few days away. The CDC has sent a proposal to the Office of Management and Budget for regulatory review, which experts indicate that the health agency is taking steps to keep the protection in place as coronavirus cases surge in many states and millions of Americans remain behind on their rent. It's not a guarantee, but the submission to OMB means that it is likely that the administration will extend the CDC order on evictions, said Seamus Roller, executive director of the National Housing Law Project. Diane Yentl, president and CEO of the National Low-Income Housing Coalition, agreed, saying that it was very unlikely that the ban will be extended before it lapses in 9 days. The CDC spokesman Jason McDonald said a decision to extend the moratorium has not been made. The White House did not immediately respond to a request for comment. Landlord groups have long opposed the eviction ban, saying that the pandemic has gone on for more than a year now and that they cannot continue to house tenants for free and allow them to rack up arrears. Short-term policies like the eviction moratorium leave renters accruing insurmountable debt and jeopardize the ability for rental housing providers to provide a safe, affordable housing, said Bob Pinniger, president of the National Apartment Association. Housing advocates point out that Congress has now allocated more than $45 billion in rental assistance to address those arrears, and to say it would be a waste of that money to allow evictions to proceed before it reaches renters and their landlords. President Biden must extend the moratorium until the emergency rental assistance funds are expended, Yentl said. Recent research has found that evictions have led to as many as 400,000 additional coronavirus cases during the pandemic because many displaced people doubling up with family members or friends are forced to turn to crowded shelters. Increased evictions has led to the increased spread of and potentially deaths from COVID-19, Yentl said. As of January, nearly 20% of renters in the U.S. were behind on making their rent payments. Although the CDC has barred most evictions amid the public health crisis, many landlords are pushing out their tenants anyway. Since the CDC ban took effect, Jim Baker, the executive director for private equity stakeholder project, has counted close to 50,000 new eviction cases filed by corporate landlords in Arizona, Florida, Georgia, Nevada, Tennessee, and Texas alone. During that same period, the eviction lab at Princeton University has identified more than 180,000 evictions in the 5 states and 19 cities that it tracks. Yet another report found that the CDC ban stopped fewer than 10% of eviction cases in Harris County, Texas, where most of Houston is located. Housing experts say that to truly stop evictions during the public health crisis, renters should not have to apply for the protection. Rather, all steps of an eviction should be stayed in the courts, and clear penalties for landlords who violate the law need to be established. Matthew Turner is one of the millions of Americans struggling to pay rent during the pandemic. In October, he was laid off from his job as a consultant. He and his husband, Gerald, have used up all of their savings and sold their furniture, including their bed, to stay in their home over the last few months. They're currently sleeping on the floor in their 2-bedroom apartment in Raleigh, North Carolina. They're now out of options and won't be able to come up with April's rent. If they're forced to leave, Turner says they'll have to sleep in his van. He hopes that the CDC ban is extended, but he says it also needs to be improved. Over the last few months, he witnessed many of his neighbors get evicted despite the law. I see people leaving every day, bringing their furniture and putting it into the dump. Turner, 48, said, "It just doesn't reach people here. I don't feel safe at all." So I wanted to bring this article up because obviously the National Eviction Ban is one of those things that is a super hot topic in the news right now. Any eviction ban is a super hot topic in the news right now, and they have been for, basically a year at this point. We're a year into this thing. The National Eviction Ban has a purpose, and obviously we all understand the purpose of it is to prevent non-paying tenants from being evicted during the middle of the coronavirus pandemic, which is understandable. That being said, being on the flip side of the coin, being on the housing provider side of the coin, there has not been this mass funding that everyone is talking about that landlords can apply for on behalf of their tenants and this and that and the other thing. We're not seeing that, at least here in our market. I've talked to several other housing providers, some other property managers here in the area. None of them have been able to access these supposed funds that are available to landlords on behalf of their tenants. So to say that those funds are available and should be flowing to landlords, they're simply not, is really what it boils down to. I don't know if that's a similar case in other markets, in other states, but I can tell you that's kind of where we're at here in New York. The other concern I have with this eviction moratorium is that it's blanket. You need to have open courts, and you need to allow some of these cases to start processing. You created a self-fulfilling prophecy by basically saying no evictions for a year. Now you're going to have a wave of evictions when this whole thing is over. And we're already hearing here in the city of Buffalo that the backlog of cases is already over a year. Just based on things that have already been filed and the backlog of cases from prior to COVID, we're already talking about a year. Probably going to be significantly longer by the time everything is said and done. And everybody is able to get in and do their filings the way that they want to and things of that nature. So, again, we're now talking about it might be another year before we're even able to get into a courtroom. It might be longer than that. And then how long is the process from there to actually remove the non-paying tenant from the property? I understand that there are people who are in a situation where this eviction moratorium is what's keeping them in their property, and I understand that. I also understand that there are tenants that are abusing this, most of them willingly. The ones that I'm finding that are abusing it it's not like they're doing it by accident. They understand what they're doing. Those are the cases that I want to see processed. Like, I think that most housing providers are capable of making a determination as to this is a tenant that legitimately has a concern, like they've lost their job or this, that, the other thing, versus this tenant is just simply not paying their rent. They're continuing to work. Maybe they're working from home now or whatever the case may be. But they've just decided to stop paying rent for whatever reason. Those are the cases that need to be processed. No one is, trying to throw out, well, I guess I shouldn't say no one, because there are bad housing providers out there just the same as there are bad tenants, just the same as there are bad anything. But I think it's a minority in both cases, in housing providers and tenants. I think it's a minority. But all of that being said, we do have to start processing some of these cases, or the problem is just going to get so much worse over time. I'm not in favor of a blanket extension of this eviction moratorium. It needs to be looked at. It needs to be reworked in such a capacity that tenants can come in and prove their case. And if they prove their case, fine. But the tenants that are abusing the system are the ones who aren't going to be able to prove their case. And those are the ones that need to be moved out of their units, and so that the housing provider can move on with life. So that's my thought on that. I guess we'll see here in the next couple days. Obviously, this article was penned on the 23rd, which was yesterday. The eviction moratorium does go to the end of this month, which obviously we're talking about just a few days here. So we'll see what this brings. We may have an update on this for next week. So that was our serious article for the day. Let's jump over to our less than serious article. This one published yesterday by Fox News. A woman celebrates a year of unfinished construction in front of her New Orleans home. We'll go ahead and jump into the article here. Have you heard the word on the street? There's a party for the street. A New Orleans woman knew just how to toast the first anniversary of some inconveniently incomplete road work in front of her home by staging a little party. Natalie Harvey lives in the Lakeview neighborhood of the Big Easy and couldn't help but laugh that the construction on her street was unfinished a year after it began. Inspired, the nurse baked a replica cake with a construction worker Legos, miniature cat trucks, traffic safety equipment, and a road closed sign, posing in front of the real-life nuisance with balloons and a party hat. I'm assuming this is her in front of her house here. Happy first birthday to our street construction. It was 1 year ago this week when they first began to rip up our street. She joked in a March 16th Facebook post. 1 year later, half the street is impassable, and just last week we had a massive 6-foot deep hole. Shots from the woman's faux fete have since gone viral, with over 1,100 likes and almost just as many shares. In a conversation with Fox News, Harvey said she's amused that her post struck a chord with so many people from near and far. I thought that I might get a good reaction locally for my post since New Orleanians, I don't know if I pronounced that one right, are used to the awful road conditions here. I didn't think that it would spread across the country and even the world, she said on Monday. I guess construction delays are universal. I'm glad that I could make some people laugh after all the frustrations of the past year. I made the cake and posted the photos to give my neighbors a reason to laugh about the situation, she joked. That's how people in New Orleans deal with absurdity. We celebrate. And then obviously you've got a little picture of the cake here. According to the resident, it's been a pain to navigate 20th Street since workers ripped up the road last March. Our driveways on my side were blocked for about 3 months this summer. Now the other side is blocked, so nearly every house on the opposite side of the street from mine has their driveway blocked, she told the news. Explaining the delay, one official cited the coronavirus pandemic and inclement weather, among other issues, as reasons for the sporadic schedule. It's a complicated project, Ramsey Green, Deputy Chief Administrative Officer for the Infrastructure, told the city told WWL. However, Green said he's been in talks with other officials to establish tighter deadlines given how long the project has taken. Now, a new completion date for the 20th Street project is set for this summer. All jokes aside, the refinished road will certainly be cause for celebration when the work is finally through. I'm very optimistic. I can't wait for my kids to be able to ride their bikes down the street one day, Harvey told the outlet. This was just a little bit something, a little bit more lighthearted I wanted to share. I just thought it was kind of funny. I know that there are some road projects here in Western New York that just seem like they have gone on forever. And I know that there are some potholes. I'm looking at you, City of Buffalo, and I'm looking at you, City of Lockport specifically. I know there are some potholes out there that you could literally park a car in and another car could just drive right over the top of you as though it wasn't even there. So we certainly understand the plight of bad roads here in Western New York, that's for sure. But I thought that would be kind of a fun little thing to share with you guys. Let's take a look at a couple of humorous things from the internet. This is one of those situations as to why you should always make sure that your cabinets are properly installed. Unfortunately for this individual, it doesn't appear that that's the case. Looks like they might be replacing some dishes and things like that. Take me somewhere expensive. I can't remember if I posted this one before or not, but if I did, I'm posting it again because it's hilarious. I just cannot believe the cost of lumber and building materials at this stage in the game. I'm hoping that we start to see some of the Canadian lumber coming in across the border, maybe a reduction in the tariffs on Canadian lumber to help bring our lumber costs down a little bit because they are absolutely insane. We've talked about it a few times here on the show. From builders' perspectives, from buyers' perspectives, it's quite the situation we find ourselves in when it comes to building materials and especially availability of building materials. Let's jump into our questions from housing providers around the country. We're going to start with this one: personality conflicts when leasing. So that's actually a little bit small on the screen. We're going to make it larger here. Hi everyone, sorry for the long post. Relatively new to managing a property, but we have been renting out a few apartments my grandfather left the family. We've rented 3 of the 4 and everything has gone smoothly. The last one has had some issues. The only applicant we had for the last unit was a family on Section 8 housing. Like I said, we're new to renting and never dealt with Section 8 before. On the day we passed the inspection, the applicant came by to discuss the lease and the next steps. They gave us the remaining deposit and expected us to give them the keys. The contract with Section 8 would not start until April 1st. We did not mind giving the keys early and with no expectation of prorated rent to help with the move-in process, but the contact at Section 8 recommended that we waited until it was closer to the start date. The tenant was very upset that we would not give him the keys early. His personality switched and he became aggressive. He then added that their daughter is getting a dog for her birthday. The original apartment listing explicitly states no animals allowed. When we reminded him of that, he said, "Oh, I have anxiety and I'm going to go to the doctor and get a note. Then you'll legally have to accept it, right?" They left after that comment. Needless to say, my mom does not feel comfortable renting to them with the way they acted. We foresee more issues down the line. No contract was signed and we do not have any form of agreement with them. They gave us a deposit to take the listing off the market, which we would happily return. Are we within our rights to reject this applicant? We'll jump back to the main screen here. So the original post date on this was March 15th. I think that that's relevant to mention because it does talk about allowing somebody to move in early for an April 1st move-in without a prorated rent there. So the original post date on this was March 15th. We're talking about a half month, about 2 weeks worth of free rent here. So you're well within your rights to reject this tenant and not sign a lease at this point. Personality is not a protected class under fair housing, and you do not need to rent to somebody who threatens you or makes you feel uncomfortable. It's as simple as that. If someone is being rude to you before you've even had a chance to sign a lease agreement with them, and if they're going to go from cooperative to aggressive that quickly, it really could be a sign of, things to come down the line. Section 8 here won't actually even do an inspection without having a signed lease, so apparently it's a little bit different in the market that you're in. But here, the Section 8 inspections don't even occur until after you have signed your lease. For that reason, we actually write our leases subject to the Section 8 inspection. So that gives us an out if Section 8 comes in and says you need to do a ton of repairs or whatever. We have some sort of an out there. So that's why we do the lease subject to the Section 8 inspection. Then after the inspection passes, that's when they send us the actual HAP contract, tells us what the portions are going to be, whatever the case may be. It's a big waste of time on the front end if you're not actually going to wind up signing a lease with that tenant. So that's where I'm coming from. And by the way, I want to make a mention because I can almost guarantee somebody will pop into the comments. The reason that I don't want to do a lease here doesn't have anything to do with Section 8. Doesn't have anything to do with the dog that they're trying to pass off as a service animal. Has everything to do with the personality conflict here. But if somebody goes from 0 to 100 like that quickly, it's really telling of what could be the potential for things to come. There's no lease signed at this point. As I mentioned, personality is not a protected class. You are well within your rights to not sign a lease and to move forward with a different applicant at this point. Return the deposit, maybe send it to them in a certified letter along with your adverse action letter as required. I would say state the bare minimum that you have to in your adverse action letter. The less you have to put in writing, the better here. Give them their deposit back and send them on their way. I think that you'll find that you'll be much better served to find a new applicant for that apartment. At least that's my thought on it. This might be a situation that you want to speak to an attorney on just before you go ahead and say, no, we're not going to rent to you or whatever the case may be, just to make sure that you're in the clear. Again, I don't know what market you're in, but at least from where I'm sitting, I think that you would be in the clear here to say, nope, sorry, not going to rent this apartment to you. We no longer feel comfortable, whatever the case may be. Handling security deposits when selling. We close on a property this Friday, and I'm figuring out security deposits / rents to be transferred to the new owner. We have 2 tenants that owe us a large sum of money, and their security deposit would not cover it. Are we entitled to keep their security deposit to cover the back rent, or must it be transferred to the new owner? So the deposit needs to be transferred to the new owner. You're likely going to have to pursue the tenants in court to get your arrears back. You're going to want to talk to your attorney about this before you close. Hopefully you have an attorney that you're working with on this transaction. In New York, obviously, we're an attorney-closed state, but you might be in a state that's a title-closed state. Talk to an attorney about this before you close. The security deposit should appear on the closing statement, as well as any prorated rents or whatever the case may be. But if the tenants haven't paid rent for the month of March, for instance, there really shouldn't be a prorate there. So definitely talk to your closing agent, find out what is happening there. Deal with that situation the way that you need to, but make sure that it gets ironed out prior to closing, even if it means that you have to bump that closing back to Monday or something like that. You want to make sure that this is squared up and taken care of before you close this property. But from where I'm sitting, again, talk to your attorney, but I'm almost certain that those security deposits are going to need to be transferred to the new owner at the time of closing. Can a tenant deny access? What would you do? A tenant made a repair request in January, but since then, for the past couple of months, she's refused to allow the landlord or the maintenance person to enter and assess and fix any repairs. So the issues, i.e. water leak, are getting worse. So this is a pretty straightforward one. In the state of New York, and I don't know what state this individual's in, unfortunately, but here in the state of New York, you're required to give 24 hours notice prior to entering an apartment. If it's an emergency situation, you don't even have to give the 24 hours notice. I wouldn't try to just walk in at this point, given the fact that this is an ongoing issue since January. I think you've passed the point where you can say, oh, it's an emergency, I need to get in there right now. But check your state law, find out what the required notice is that you have to provide before you're allowed to enter the apartment. Notify the tenant in every way that you possibly can. Send them a letter, plan this out, plan this for a week ahead or whatever. Send them a letter in the mail, maybe send a certified letter on top of that. Send them an email, send them multiple text messages. Post a notice on the door and take a time and date stamp photo of it. And in that letter, make sure that you are stating that you're going to be entering the home on X date at X time with a vendor to assess, repair, whatever needs to be done. That way it's understood why you're coming in. And check your state law again for what you have to do in terms of timelines, how long of a notice you have to give the tenant before you just come in. You do have a right to enter your property to complete repairs, especially when the issue at hand is causing additional damage. Obviously, follow your protocols for COVID. Make sure that you're masking up or wearing booties or wearing gloves, whatever's required in your state, in your municipality. Follow the appropriate protocols to make sure that everybody's remaining safe. But you've got to get in there and make sure that that work is getting fixed, that those issues are getting fixed, or it's just going to continue to cause more and more damage to the property. The one other thing that I will mention on this is document everything. The more documentation you have in a situation like this, the better off you are. Chances are you're the only one documenting it. So it's going to be your documentation versus no documentation if it ever got to a courtroom or something like that. But realistically speaking, you do have the right to enter the apartment to complete these repairs, especially if these issues are causing further damage to the property. Worst case scenario, you may need to contact your local police department and talk to them about having an escort into the unit. Hopefully it doesn't come to that. If it does come to that, you may have to make that phone call. You may have to be escorted into the property so that you can do what you need to do. Chances are if it gets to that point and police show up, the tenant's going to be a lot more cooperative. So it's not a fun situation, but you do have rights as the property owner or as the property manager or whatever the case may be here. You do have rights to enter that unit to do the repairs that you need to do. Obviously, talk to an attorney for more information as to how to exercise your rights, how to do it legally without getting yourself in a bind. Follow your proper protocols when it comes to COVID and things like that. Do what you have to do, but get those repairs done. That pretty much wraps things up for this week's episode of Ask a Property Manager. Thank you all so much for watching. We truly do appreciate it. We love producing Ask a Property Manager, and you can definitely help us to improve. Drop a question in the comments either on Facebook or YouTube, and your question may be answered in an upcoming episode. If you enjoyed this content or if we brought some value to your day, do us a favor, hit that thumbs up button. YouTube and Facebook both push videos based on community feedback, so every like, comment, subscribe, and share helps us to grow and reach more people. We'll be back next week, March 31st. That's next Wednesday at 10 a.m. Eastern with another show you won't want to miss. Thank you all so much for watching, and we'll see you next week.